And welcome back. You're still watching It's a Beautiful Day. This is Weather HQ. Now, a powerful new study from New York University has linked chemicals commonly found in plastics, specifically phthalates, if I'm saying that correctly, to hundreds of thousands of deaths from heart disease globally. Now, in response, Greenpeace Philippines is renewing its urgent call for a nationwide ban on single-use plastics, particularly sachets that flood our markets and households daily. Now, to know more about it, we are joined via Zoom by Ms. Marian Ledesma, Zero Waste Campaigner of Greenpeace Philippines. Magandang umaga, Ms. Ledesma. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a beautiful day.
Magandang umaga sa lahat. And yeah, thank you for inviting me to talk about this particular study and the impacts of plastic across its life cycle.
All right, so obviously it's not a new concept, trying to ban single-use plastics here in the Philippines. To be fair, there are some LGUs who have been making efforts to address it, especially Quezon City is one of the close-to-home examples is here in Metro Manila. But you take a look at the urgent need to make this a more national issue, especially knowing that there are now linked deaths, according to this study. How much more urgent does this make this fight for Greenpeace in particular?
Yeah, this study just adds to the larger volume of data and scientific evidence that we already have that's telling us that we must reduce plastic production and use, and we can't waste time on it. And like what you said, it's completely urgent, this issue, because when you look at plastics and the plastic crisis, you can see that it's not just an issue of health or environment. All of these are interconnected to other social justice issues as well as other environmental issues and even economic problems. You're going to see all these different factors come into play when it comes to the plastic crisis, because what we're seeing is that every stage of plastic's life actually has negative impacts on people, on our planet, and even on our climate. So there needs to be action from the government to protect people and start establishing alternatives to single-use plastic, because these are the only solutions that we can really see that will address the problem at source. We've given a lot of companies free pass for so long na kailangan na rin na kumilos na nila. They have the resources and technology to create reuse systems so people actually have affordable, accessible, and safe alternatives to single-use plastic here in the Philippines.
You know, we're looking at what feels like a necessary cultural shift in terms of trying to educate the Philippine consumer against the use of single-use plastics. Is this, in your opinion, the biggest challenge that we have? Obviously, there's all the hurdle of mga legislation or yung mga restrictions when it comes to production in general. But from a consumer standpoint, culturally speaking, single-use sachets in particular, single-use plastics, have been such a big issue in terms of the pollution that we have produced as a country so far.
Yeah, you're right. A cultural shift is definitely needed, but under all of it, it has to be, I think, underpinned by more systemic changes, and that really needs to come from policies and also corporate action. In the sense, people will choose single-use plastics because that's currently what's readily and available to them. But they really have no choice in the form of alternatives. Kahit gusto pa nila to avoid single-use plastics, they're still going to opt for that because that's just what's there in our groceries and our markets. So to really drive that cultural shift, there has to be regulations around it that will incentivize all of these businesses to provide those alternatives. There has to be incentives for the consumers to want to shift and guarantee, of course, that all these alternatives that will be put in place to replace single-use plastic are affordable and fair for them, also safe, because whatever we're going to put out there commercially, it has to follow certain guidelines that will ensure that we're just not replacing plastic with another regrettable substitute, and also not replacing it with something that's equally disposable. And I guess one of the biggest challenges out there to these alternatives is really that there's are single-use plastics out there, so they're always going to be the choice, and they definitely need to be banned first, and then of course, all of the framework of the policies na kailangan to ensure that alternatives will be more affordable and safe have to be there through legislation. The funny thing about culture is that Filipinos actually lived without single-use plastic, and we've had some reuse and refill practices that were already there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they were just co-opted and replaced with sachets. So if we can tap back into those past traditions and just modernize them for to make them more convenient and accessible today, it really would be a safer and more environmentally friendly alternative.
You mentioned the systemic change also needs to happen. When you take a look at the policies that you'd be lobbying for, or at least pushing as an organization, are there any pieces of legislation, any pieces of policy making that you are encouraging that hopefully be given more priority at the next given opportunity?
Yeah, for one, there can be a bill with different features that will enable reuse and refill systems in different sectors and for different applications. And reuse is actually very different from recycling, because with recycling, there's already waste that's
Mhm.
being produced. Reuse and refill systems are those systems that walang basura nagagawa. It's a zero waste model essentially, and it relies on making sure that you're reusing products and packaging again and again, but for the same purpose that they were made. And a bill that will enable reuse, as well as also mandate equivalent na reduction in plastic footprint of corporations is really what's needed. At ano yung laman ng bill na to? It should have targets for shifting away from single-use plastic, reuse and refill. There should be incentives for businesses engaging in reuse and plastic-free options, and also a measure to ensure capacity building and training for workers who will transition to a reuse economy. And Greenpeace and our partners in the Philippine Reuse Consortium are developing this policy framework, and
Mhm.
we hope to really work with legislators who prioritize people's health and safety as well as environmental protection to create a goal. Kasi yung health at saka environmental protection, they're really one and the same goal, especially in terms of plastic pollution.
Yeah, we had this conversation because of the initial report, and I want to circle back to that. It's always been an environmental emergency when it comes to when talking about single-use plastics. But considering that there are now tangible deaths linked to the use of plastics, does that turn this into your mind a more health emergency right now and not just an environmental emergency? I know that we've always considered this a health emergency, but then it feels like the stakes have been amped up a bit, considering that there are not just a few deaths, it's hundreds of thousands of deaths linked to the use of plastic.
Yeah, 350,000 deaths in 2018 alone is pretty grave. And yeah, it definitely ups the stakes when you look at the problem now, because there have been so much data that even from the very beginning of plastics life, when you're extracting fossil fuels, there's already a lot of health threats that are being made with all the chemicals that are being used to extract fossil fuels. And then when you go through the whole production process, there's toxic emissions and pollutants being released. But this particular study just really cements all of these issues, because it's, as you said, quite tangible siya na link to everyday plastics and to these deaths from heart diseases. And hindi lang ito yung only na chemical that is hazardous when it comes to plastics. So phthalates are just one kind of chemical group that is being used in plastics, but actually there's over 4,200 hazardous chemicals that are being used in different kinds of plastics. So out of the 16,000 na ginagamit for plastic products, over 25% are actually considered dangerous, and there are no regulations around them in the sense that they're still being utilized. There's only some countries or different frameworks that will say you can use a certain amount of these chemicals, pero to say na wholesale na elimination in the use of plastic products, they're not out there yet. And again, I want to say that it's not just a health issue, because when you're looking at all of the health related costs rin of using certain chemicals, actually just three chemicals, there's been studies that
Mhm.
show that around $922 billion in the US alone lang yung naggagastos because of disease, because of disability and premature death,
Yeah.
attributed to just three chemicals. And one of those is phthalates, the other is bisphenol A.
Mhm. And of course, there's just so much to discuss when it comes to this. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time for it. For those who want to see more and learn more about the fight against plastic waste, do check out Greenpeace. Marian, really appreciate you coming on this morning and giving us all your insights. And hopefully we get to see you again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and have a good day.
That was Marian Ledesma, Zero Waste Campaigner of Greenpeace Philippines.